Now, we're going to have a little session, just a very brief one, for questions and answers. So I'd like to invite James and Stevie and David back up here, if you don't mind. And I'll come round through the audience with a microphone for your questioning.
Dr. Anne, thank you.
Hi, this is a question for David. You mentioned a connection between a potential rise in the use of antidepressants if there's also a stressing the use of talking therapy. And I wondered if you could just explain that a little bit.
Yeah, and I guess I rushed a little bit there. In the States, it's a little clearer. If you go to either Canada or the States, when the SSRIs came on stream, among the people who were the biggest referrers of patients to doctors for SSRIs were cognitive therapists. They want, the extra little bit of help to help the cognitive therapy work. That happens in the UK as well. Generally speaking, what we want to do with the kids, the Bart Simpson thing is all about keeping people out of the health service. It's not because the health services are evil or things like that, but we've moved from a world where we treated people for severe problems. Because generally speaking, from screening through to giving pills, to giving surgery, to giving therapy, we can do harm. We can do great good as well, but part of what we used to do much more than we do now was to restrict the things we did to people who really needed them, who stood to benefit. Once we think our good intentions are enough and spread what we're doing widely across the entire population, we are going to cause harm. And unfortunately, psychotherapists are among all people, they're the people who think they've got really good intentions. They really want to help you and don't realize that they can harm you when they refer you to someone like me, asking me, couldn't I add an SSRI into what they're doing?
Hi, it's David Rees from Miser by Capital. It's a question again for David. So, if I'm kind of reading this right, we've created an ecosystem which by its very nature is toxic. So, I'm just wondering, since we've embarked on this journey of prescription to the point whereby we've now got decreasing life expectancy, fact, as a result of polypharmacy and over-medication, it's not a quick fix, right? Because what we've done is we've created an environment which is structural now. And I wondered to what extent you think we can remediate this over the course of the next X period of time. And what would be the first step that you would suggest as a means of kind of correcting what is now a structural problem in the industry? That would be really helpful.
Very quickly, there's two key things. One that the politicians here can do, which is to insist on access to clinical trial data. The fact that people like me say we're operating according to science, but no one can see what the data looks like, this is just a monstrous kind of situation that needs to be changed. The people who, you said there's a toxic problem, that there's a problem with the industry. I'm not sure the problem is the pharmaceutical industry as such. I think among the people who've failed us all the most are doctors like me. You've been hearing again and again from Stevie and James, doctors don't listen. When people come and say to them, look, this is what's happening to me. So we've moved from a world where doctors weren't always perfect, but they were more inclined to recognize that if you had a problem that had come on after you took a pill, and they halted the pill and it cleared up, that it was likely the pill was causing the problem. Doctors have lost the ability to do that. There's a few ways forward with this. One is that you, the people who go on pills, can ask your doctor for the data. Do you actually have the data? And you can, we need to insist that people listen to us, particularly if they don't have the data. The other aspect to it is doctors risk going out of business. Because the NHS and health services over in the States operate on the basis these pills work well and don't have side effects, well, if that's the case, nurses and pharmacists are cheaper prescribers than doctors. If doctors don't wake up and realize, because of the money they were being paid all this money to be experts, which recognize that the pills can do good, but can also do harm. If we don't recognize the harms, we're going out of business.
Yes, my name is Jane Davidson. I am Welsh, but I don't live in Wales, so I'm very interested in what you have to say about these things being applicable to Wales, because I think there's an even bigger problem in England simply because of the population. And I speak as a survivor of some of this medication. And I am interested in all the points you've made. There's so many questions I could ask. But following on from the questions just been asked, I feel we've had the problem for many years of what I would call statistics-based medicine rather than diagnostic medicine. But what I want to know is, I do follow quite a few doctors and psychiatric doctors and other types of people around the sort of health industry on Twitter. And I wondered if you had any hope, as I do, of a move which I see not necessarily in the psychiatric world, although there's a lot of controversy among different psychiatrists, but in the world of other types of health problems, which are chronic problems like diabetes and those sort of associated problems, where there is a move by a number of GPs in this country to practice what they call functional medicine or lifestyle medicine, where they're trying really to come away from drugs-based solutions and trying to, well, a lot of them nutritional solutions, which, you know, again, I've read a lot about nutrition and depression and things like that. So I just wondered, throughout all this sort of stuff that you're talking about and the difficulties and where we've arrived at now, is there some hope? Because, as you said, doctors will go out of business. I've actually heard that said by other doctors, other GPs, saying, unless we listen to nutritionists and other scientists, we're going to go out of business. So I just wondered if anybody has any hope, as I do, about the way medicine might be changing.
I believe in the medical model, which emerged around 1800, and since it emerged, we have gained in life expectancy year on year till about 2 years ago. That's the point of change. Now, I don't believe at this stage that it's a good idea to abandon the medical model. That we oughtn't to, but in actual fact, what we've done is we have abandoned it. We've adopted a pharmaceutical model, and we need to get back to the medical model and not an alternative approach. But by what I'm going to say next may help reconcile what I'm saying and what you've just said, which is we need to get back to medicine, and that means getting back to generalism. Often the way the problems get framed by people like me is, well, this is a problem with general practitioners. They hand out these drugs too quickly. People, we need to restrict the use of antidepressants to specialists. Well, specialists are the problem. Generalists aren't. On the whole, generalists are much better doctors than specialists, who you could reframe as partialists. We need to de-prescribe. We need to get you down from 5 drugs or more to less than 5. We also need to de-partialize you. We need to get you back to a doctor who has a broader point of view.
Thank you. I'd like to say it's a really interesting question, and I'm certainly no expert. I mean, expert in my own experience, but there was a brilliant example of this. I think yesterday or the day before, Matt Hancock, the Health and Social Care Secretary, an interview in the Daily Mail, said he wants to clamp down on what he sees as inappropriate prescribing, and he does want to investigate more social methods of responding to people's distress and people's problems. So, my view of it is, I've never been on more medications in my life than I am now, and most of those are to treat the issues caused by an antidepressant I was prescribed initially. So I tend to think that we are moving the problem further down the line for people into older age by prescribing medications that then cause problems further down the line. And personally, I feel, people may disagree, personally I feel that we are very quick to prescribe, and I know GPs are under pressure with their time, but I think it's high time that we did start to look at curbing inappropriate prescribing, and perhaps a pill being the first option in each case. That's personally my...
Yes, I was just muttering, I'm not sure I've got all that much else to add. I feel that there might be a little bit of a change going on now, because your question was very much about have we got any hope? And I guess we have to have hope, really, and hope that what we're trying to do in the messages that we're trying to get out now about a prescription being the first port of call for everything. Because I feel that the kids growing up now also feel that that they can, if there's any aspect of themselves that they don't like anymore, that they can change, whether it's changing their appearance or going to a doctor and because they don't like something about their personality, they don't like that they feel a bit unhappy about something. Yeah, I think hope has to be the way forward. The thing that I think is also very, very important is us being able to move away from the idea that if you have some form of emotional distress, that it can be dealt with immediately and you can just go and get on with your life. Because emotional distress is usually an indication that there's something not quite right in your life and that you need to interact with other human beings in order to get a perspective on what's happening in your life that you can't see. And being given an antidepressant does not give you that perspective. It's only interacting with groups of people or with therapists or whoever else you need to turn for help. That's where you're going to get the, oh, I can see it from this angle now, as opposed to being stuck in this angle. I may have gone completely off topic, I'm not sure, but there we go.
Hi, my name's Sally Richards. This is for the panel and also maybe any of the past representatives here, because we've heard excellent presentations this afternoon and want to maybe feel inspired or invigorated to do something. What's the one thing that you would ask any one of us to go away and actually do to actually try and deal with this?
I feel I'd like to answer that one.
Oh, please do.
There's something that I did one afternoon. I stood outside Boots and I watched these people bringing out their little packages of prescribed medication that's costing the NHS in Wales 800 million a year at the moment. In 2 or 3 years' time, that's going to be £1 trillion per year that the NHS in Wales is going to be spending on medication. And I know of so many people who've got cupboards full of medicines that have never been used and will not be used. But they're there just in case, just in case. But it's free in the UK. In Wales, sorry. In Wales, it's free. I would like, from that little piece of research that I did, it was close to 200 people, 189 people that I asked outside the doors of Boots. 17% of them actually read the leaflet that came inside the box of medication. In that leaflet, there's a wealth of information on what possible and common side effects that you're going to receive from that. And instead of going back to your doctor saying, oh, I've got an upset stomach, that medication that you've just had from Boots causes an upset stomach. So there's no need for you to be treated for a second illness. You should be treated for the first one and the issue with that prescribed medication itself. So 17% of you, so if anything that you could do from this meeting today is to read the leaflet inside that box of medication. Thank you.
Sally, you ask a brilliant question. You know, it really is about what we can do from this. And, you know, personally, I have had, you know, reasonably good experiences using social media to try and get the message out and starting a petition. It's not for everyone, but, you know, it does kind of raise a bit of general awareness. And not to steal Stevie's thunder, but, you know, Stevie's got a petition into the Welsh Assembly. So, you know, write to your Assembly member, you know, write and say there is a petition, you know, this is an issue that we need to deal with. The more we can get ministers engaged with this kind of activity, and, you know, today's brilliant for that, you know, I think we'll start to get this on the mainstream radar, because it is on the mainstream radar. But I think there are things we can do, all of us individually, whether it's speaking to friends, family members, you know, posting on Facebook, whatever else it might be. It all has gravity and it all makes a difference and an impact. So, you know, thank you for your question.
I guess what springs to mind for me is that there are so many people who are given a prescription for an antidepressant now. I've heard 1 in 10, 1 in 9, in parts of Wales 1 in 3, that actually in any group of people there's going to be someone taking them. And I don't think people still talk about it very much. And I think that one of the things that everybody could do is maybe try and engage with your friends and family and find out what people's experiences are of them. And there will be people taking them
who won't realise that as they maybe take less, or as they stop taking them, that the symptoms that suddenly come on, and they do, if it's withdrawal, your symptoms will come on 36, 48 hours. For me, it was, I could time it. I could time it. I could time when I'd start to feel tearful. I could time when I'd start to feel anxious. And then as you reinstate the drug, again, in that very short period of time, you feel well again as the drug puts back in to your system what it's missing. So there will be people who don't realise and who will think that they are ill and that they won't realise they're in withdrawal. And so if there's anything that you can do to get that message out to people that just maybe you're not as ill as you think you are, and you may be dependent, and there is something with that germ of knowledge that you can do to help yourself. People are thinking they're ill and they're not.
I think it's a mistake to focus on just the antidepressants. What we've said about this group of drugs applies to every drug that you may be on, or your children, or your parents, or people you know may be on. There's an issue about asking your doctor for access to the data behind any drug that he or she gives you, and forcing them to say, well, I mean, to actually produce the data, make them uncomfortable, okay? There's a further issue, which is trust. I mean, one of the weird things about all this, anywhere else in the world, anything else you do, if, you know, you see a particular thing happening, you trust your judgment about what you're seeing in front of you. When you go to a doctor, you're inclined to not trust your judgment. He or she says to you, this isn't happening. Now, you've got to turn that around. You've got to say, why don't you believe me? So we need a movement about people saying, why do you not believe me? And the flip side of that is this, which we haven't talked about. Doctors are decent people. They're not saints. But one of the extraordinary things that's not being talked about at the moment is when you come to them and talk about an adverse effect you're having on a pill, they, for the most part, get nasty. And you need, I mean, it's an abusive relationship in ways. It's the point made actually by Stevie. While you're doing as you're told, everything's fine. When you raise an issue, things quickly become not so fine with a lot of doctors. We need to, I mean, they will come round. It's just, it needs to be highlighted to them that they are being not particularly therapeutic, not particularly humane, and at times, frankly, nasty.
Thank you, David. I have one final question for Anne.
Can I just ask, before I risk consulting anybody, is there any doctors here apart from Dr. Healy? Right, well that just answers my question really, because this has been advertised quite widely throughout Wales, and one would have hoped that somebody who was a GP might have come here today. I had a letter published yesterday in the British Journal of GPs, and I was quite surprised that they actually published it, but I'm quite pleased they actually published it, because there are a few out there listening. Dr. Des Spence, for a start, in Scotland, wonderful person. Dr. Terry Lynch, obviously Dr. Healy. There are some really brave medical people that swim against the tide, and it's really difficult, I think, for anybody in the medical profession to swim against the tide, because for obvious reasons, if they do, it seems to me that something happens, you know, their careers can be affected, and that's what makes it so difficult. And, you know, I was at my GP's a couple of weeks ago, and I had sympathy. It was a locum, so how on earth was I going to be able to talk to them about anything regarding medication? And that's fairly typical, I think, of busy practices today. So I'm not quite sure who's going to actually be the experts in the future, but I don't know. I've got a letter here. I'll pick a few bits out of it. Thank you, Dr. Spence, for yet again speaking out when psychiatry remains silent, or takes to Twitter to maintain antidepressants are safe and effective, or tries to persuade us pill shaming is worse than being dependent on a toxic substance that has many pleasant side effects, and indeed causes many individuals to become dysfunctional when they try to withdraw, or as the medical profession prefers, discontinues their medication. Current NICE guidelines which maintains withdrawal symptoms cease within a couple of weeks, certainly do not apply to myself or thousands of others I am in contact with online. Thousands. It is deeply worrying that many of us were told, and are still told, that we have a chemical imbalance. No wonder GPs issue repeat prescriptions, sometimes over decades. I certainly was told this back in 2009. Why would anyone discontinue a medication that did something as vital as correct this imbalance? Does a diabetic discontinue insulin? The awful withdrawal symptoms that occurred if one did not take one's meds even for a week, let alone a couple of weeks, just confirmed this. Plus, magically, the symptoms disappeared upon resumption of the pills, landing credence to the fairy story, nay, horror story, that was the myth of the chemical imbalance theory for depression. I do have the reference if you want it. This time last year, I finished a 2-year taper from a 32-year addiction, stroke, dependence upon benzodiazepines. I am extremely wary of trying to taper antidepressants. It seems to me lessons that should have been learnt, again back to Dr. Healy and about how it takes 30 years for the realisation that a drug is dangerous and maybe not safe, might come to mind here. 32 years it took me before I tried to come off diazepam. It seems to me lessons that should have been learnt by the medical profession regarding benzodiazepines have been ignored. And again, us patients find ourselves stuck on a toxic medication, which, like benzodiazepines, we have little choice but to remain on, as there is no, quote, safe and effective guidance and support for the long, torturous process of withdrawal.
Thank you, Anne, for your message. I've got a question, but also from Paul, and then I'll bring it back to the panel.
Hello, my name's Paul. It's a question for everyone, really, not just Dr. David Healy. I actually got 2 questions, but I'll just explain a bit about my situation. I first became ill when I came off antidepressants, Prozac, in 2007, which is now 11 years ago. I was told that it was safe to go cold turkey and that I wouldn't get any withdrawal effects. I've been extremely ill ever since. I'm still extremely ill now. It's been really difficult for me to come here today. I'd like to know if you could give any information on the fact that I actually came off the drugs. I reinstated and went back on the drugs. And 5 years ago, I came off them, and I'm still extremely ill 5 years later, but to the point where it is difficult for me to walk. I feel very dizzy, got lots of pain, derealization, lots and lots of symptoms still after 5 years. I'm wondering if you actually believe, or it could be neurotoxicity, damage to the brain and to the nervous system. Obviously, Dr. Healy would know about that much more than just withdrawal from the drugs. Because after 5 years, is it protracted withdrawal and not damage to the brain as well? Could it just be withdrawal after 5 years? After 11 years of being completely ill and unable to do anything, could it be withdrawal, do you think?
Let me try and frame it this way, which is that when you go on an antidepressant and SSRI, one of the things that happens to all of us within 30 minutes, but it's not in the label of the drug. I mean, you are told to read the label of the drug. The label of the drug doesn't include most of the common things these drugs do. One of the things that will happen to every man here who goes on an antidepressant, it'll happen to the ladies in a slightly different fashion, but your penis will become numb. You can feel it. It may be marked or not so marked, but it happens in every single person. Now, when you come off the drugs, for the most part, what we were told was these things clear up reasonably quickly. But it's clear that a proportion of people, it doesn't clear up. And in fact, you might have had a mild problem on the drug and it gets much worse when you come off it. And 20 years later, it may still be there. The common reaction from your doctor is that this is impossible. The drug isn't in your body. It can't be causing this problem. But in actual fact, with the antipsychotic group of drugs, they cause tardive dyskinesia, a neurological problem that we know often appears only when you stop the drug, and 20 years later it can still be there. So the question is this a withdrawal effect or is it damage? We don't know. Part of the picture we get, having used antidepressants, is there are legacy effects. There are things that endure for a long time, whether they're best called withdrawal or whether they're neurotoxic type effects is unclear. But what would be great is to get research on all this, because just because they're neurotoxic doesn't mean they're permanent. It's very clear in the case of people who've got enduring sexual dysfunction. Some of them then clear up. And there's hints as well, they can try different drugs which don't seem to help, but when they stop the drug that isn't helping, actually for a week or two, they can be fine again. So these things are not totally irreversible. If we can get them recognized and get research done on what's actually happening, we may be able to help. So that's part of the appeal. The appeal here today for recognition, okay?
Paul, I just wanted to say that my heart goes out to you. It really does. My long-suffering other half, Miranda, will tell you that, I've been through hell the last 6 years, taking the drugs and coming off them. And, I just want to say thank you for coming along and making the effort to be here. I think it's incredibly important never to lose hope. And I have honestly spoken to people that have been on the drugs for 20 years, have come off and had 5 or 10 years of hell, but they have improved over that time. I'm not an expert. I can't predict the future for anyone, but I think, the human body is a miracle of biological engineering. And I think there's every reason to hope that the body can heal itself and can get better over time. The frustration is no one can tell you how long that process takes, and it can take a long time and be very frustrating. But I just wanted to say that, you're not alone in what you're experiencing. And thank you so much for coming. And I just want to say that my heart goes out to you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience and your time today. You're the most important people here. But thank you for the people who are online who are watching from across the world, apparently, and which is quite nice. And also, thank you for the Assembly for allowing us to have a discussion here. Mark Drakeford has sponsored this event. Unfortunately, he's now in plenary. He's now been First Minister. And really, really thank you very much to Mark for allowing and sponsoring this event. I would like to thank these 3 speakers. They've been fantastic. Dr. David Healy, Stevie Lewis and James Moore. And again, to thank you for attending. Thank you very much.